The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Callaway Music Academy, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor of the waiting area. Alex sat on the edge of a hard bench, his fingers tapping an invisible melody on his knee. The worn sheet music in his hands had dog-eared corners and pencil markings that showed years of use. He'd studied these pages until he could see them behind his closed eyelids at night. Around him, 15 other teenagers waited in tense silence. Some practiced finger movements in the air, others scrolled through their phones with unfocused eyes, and a few whispered to parents in expensive suits who had taken the day off work to be here. Alex was alone. His mom had wanted to come, but the morning shift at the hospital couldn't be traded, and they both knew they needed the money more than they needed moral support. "What's your piece?" asked a girl sitting nearby. Her violin case rested between her feet like a faithful pet, and her hair was pulled back in a perfect bun without a single strand out of place. Alex looked up, startled by the sudden break in silence. "Chopin, Ballet No. 1. And then, "Something I wrote." The girl's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're playing your own composition? That's brave. Dr. Hargrove is tough on original pieces." "Who's Dr. Hargrove?" Alex asked, immediately regretting the question when he saw the girl's expression change to one of disbelief. "You're kidding, right? Victoria Hargrove, the director? She was with the New York Philharmonic for 20 years before she started running this place. She's a legend." Alex's throat tightened. He'd known the audition would be difficult, but he hadn't researched the judging panel. The community center where he practiced had a bulletin board with academy flyers, and his piano teacher there, a kind volunteer named Mrs. Chen, had insisted he apply for the scholarship program. "You play with your soul," she'd told him, pressing the application into his hands. They need to hear that. Now, sitting among kids who probably had private lessons since they could walk, Alex wondered if soul would be enough. A door opened at the far end of the hall, and a thin man with a clipboard emerged. "Thomas Lee," he called out, and a boy with precisely combed hair stood up, clutching a folder of sheet music to his chest. The boy's father gave him a stiff pat on the shoulder before he disappeared through the door. "That's the 5th one this morning," the girl with the violin whispered. "Nobody's come out looking happy." Alex nodded, trying to swallow the growing lump in his throat. He pulled out his phone, an old model with a cracked screen, and reread the message from his mom. "Play like nobody's watching, just like at home. Love you no matter what happens." 20 minutes later, Thomas Lee emerged from the audition room, his face pale. He shook his head at his father, and they left without a word to anyone. The thin man appeared again, consulting his clipboard. "Alex." "Rivera?" Alex stood up on legs that suddenly felt like they might give way beneath him. The girl with the violin gave him a small smile. "Good luck," she said, but her tone suggested he'd need more than luck to impress Dr. Hargrove. The audition room was larger than Alex had expected, with high ceilings and a stage at one end where a magnificent grand piano waited, its lid propped open like a giant black wing. In the center of the room, a panel of 5 people sat behind a long table covered with papers, water bottles, and laptops. 4 of them looked up briefly as Alex entered, but the woman in the middle didn't raise her eyes from the papers she was reviewing. "Name?" she asked, her voice sharp in the quiet room. "Alex Rivera," he answered, his own voice sounding small, in the vast space. Now she looked up, studying him over the rim of her glasses. Dr. Victoria Hargrove was not what Alex had pictured. She was younger than he expected, maybe in her early 50s, with dark hair streaked with silver and intense eyes that seemed to be evaluating everything about him at once, from his second-hand sneakers to his too long hair that his mom had tried to trim the night before. "You're from the community program," she stated rather than asked, glancing down at his application. "Yes, ma'am." One of the other judges, an older man with kind eyes, leaned forward. "And who has been your instructor, Mr. Rivera?" "Mrs. Chen at the Northside Community Center, but mostly myself. I mean, Mrs. Chen helped a lot, but she only volunteers twice a week, so the rest of the time I practice on my own." A silence followed his words. Dr. Hargrove exchanged a look with the woman sitting beside her, and Alex, Heard someone sigh. He clutched his sheet music tighter, the paper crinkling under his grip. I see, Dr. Hargrove said finally. And you've prepared Chopin's Ballad No. 1? There was a hint of something in her voice. Doubt, perhaps, or resignation. Yes. And a piece I composed. Dr. Hargrove's eyebrows rose slightly. Self-taught, and a composer. How ambitious. She gestured toward the piano. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Rivera. Alex walked to the piano, his heart hammering so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. The bench was set higher than he was used to, and he adjusted it, aware of the scraping sound it made against the floor. He arranged his sheet music, though he rarely looked at it when he played anymore, and placed his hands in his lap, taking a deep breath. Today would be nice, Mr. Rivera, Dr. Hargrove said, checking her watch. Behind her, Alex could see a line of photographs on the wall, famous musicians who had passed through these halls. Some faces he recognized, others were strangers to him. But all had found their start here. This was his one chance to join them, to get the training he could never afford otherwise. He looked down at his hands. The skin was rough from his weekend, job stocking shelves at the grocery store. Not the hands of a classical pianist, not the hands these judges expected to create beautiful music. Another sigh from the table. Mr. Rivera? Dr. Hargrove prompted, her patience clearly wearing thin. Another community case, someone muttered, just loud enough for Alex to hear. Dr. Hargrove set down her pen with a sharp click. Well, we've already heard 15 auditions today, and frankly, I'm not expecting any surprises. She turned to her colleagues. In fact, if he plays the piano, I'll kneel right here, she said with a laugh that others around the table nervously joined. Heat rushed to Alex's face. He knew he was being mocked. Knew they had already decided about him before he'd played a single note. The same way people always decided about kids from his neighborhood, that they weren't good enough, didn't belong in places like this. For a moment, he considered walking out. Why humiliate himself for people who had already judged him? But then, he thought of the nights he'd spent practicing on the old upright piano at the community center after his shifts, sometimes until Mrs. Chen had to kindly kick him out at closing time. He thought of his mother working double shifts to keep them afloat since his father left. He thought of the melodies that filled his head even when he wasn't at a piano. How music was the one thing that made sense when nothing else did. Alex placed his fingers on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness beneath his fingertips. He closed, his eyes shutting out the judges, the grand room, the pressure. In his mind, he was back at the community center, playing just for himself. He began softly, the opening notes of Chopin's Ballade flowing from his hands. As the piece built, he let himself get lost in it, in the story it told, of hope and struggle, of beauty found in unexpected places. His body swayed slightly as his fingers danced across the keys, no longer thinking about technique or impressing anyone. This was why he played, this feeling of being carried away by something larger than himself. The last notes of the piece hung in the air, and Alex opened his eyes, almost surprised to find himself still in the audition room. For a moment, there was complete silence. He turned on the bench to face the judges, unsure what to expect. Dr. Hargrove was sitting perfectly still, her pen forgotten in her hand, her eyes fixed on Alex with an expression he couldn't read. The kind-eyed man was smiling slightly, and the woman next to Dr. Hargrove was hurriedly writing something down. That was, Dr. Hargrove began, then cleared her throat. You mentioned an original composition? Alex nodded, his confidence growing just a little. Yes, it's called 3 Years Later. I wrote it after my mom got sick. I'd like to hear it, she said, and this time there was no mockery in her voice, no impatience. Alex turned back to the piano, placing his hands once more on the keys. This piece came from somewhere even deeper within him. He didn't need sheet music for this one, it was written on his heart. As the first notes filled the room, Alex knew that whatever happened next, whether they accepted him or not, he had found his voice. And for just a few minutes in this grand room, they were actually listening. The first notes of Alex's original composition filled the audition room, hesitant at first, like a question being asked. Then the melody grew stronger, his fingers finding their rhythm on the keys of the grand piano. This piece wasn't technically perfect like his Chopin. It didn't follow all the classical rules he'd tried to teach himself from borrowed library books. But it was honest. He'd written it during the long nights sitting beside his mom's hospital bed 3 years ago, working out the tune in his head, then rushing to the community center piano the next day to capture what he'd heard in his mind. The piece moved from dark, uncertain chords to something brighter, more hopeful. Alex forgot about the judges watching him, forgot about Dr. Hargrove's mocking challenge, forgot about the scholarship he desperately needed. For these few minutes, there was only the music. When the final note faded into silence, Alex kept his eyes closed for a moment longer, not quite ready to return to reality. The quiet in the room felt different now, charged somehow like the air before a storm. He turned slowly on the bench to face the judges. Dr. Hargrove was staring at him, her expression completely transformed. The dismissive smirk was gone, replaced by something Alex couldn't quite name. Surprise? Confusion? Her colleagues looked equally stunned. The kind-eyed man was nodding slightly, as if confirming something to himself. Dr. Hargrove set down her pen and cleared her throat. "Mr. Rivera," she said, her voice softer than before. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Alex shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "I told you. Mrs. Chen helped when she could, but mostly I just practiced a lot. The community center lets, me use their piano whenever they're open. And your composition, did someone help you write it?" He shook his head. "No, I don't really know the proper way to write music. I just played until it sounded right." The woman sitting next to Dr. Hargrove leaned over to whisper something in her ear. Dr. Hargrove nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving Alex. "You said the community center has a piano," she said. "Do you have one at home?" Alex felt his cheeks grow warm. "No, we don't have room for a real piano. I have a keyboard, though. It's old, but it works okay." He didn't mention that 3 of the keys were broken, or that he'd taped paper labels on each key when he first got it from a thrift store, not knowing how to play a single note. Dr. Hargrove stood up suddenly, pushing back her chair. The other judges watched her with curious expressions as she walked around the table and approached the stage. Alex tensed, not sure what to expect. She stopped a few feet from the piano. "Play the middle section of your piece again," she instructed. "The part where the melody shifts." Alex turned back to the piano, finding the keys once more. He began playing from memory, starting at the transition where the music moved from its darker opening to the more hopeful theme. As he played, he sensed Dr. Hargrove moving closer until she was standing right beside the piano. "Stop," she said abruptly, and Alex's hands froze above the keys. "That progression there, play it again, just those few measures," he repeated. The section, a series of chords that resolved in an unusual way. "That's not a traditional resolution," she said. "Did you know that?" Alex's hands fell to his lap. "I don't know what that means," he admitted. "It just sounded right to me." "It shouldn't work," she said, almost to herself. "But it does." She looked at him with new intensity. "Mr. Rivera, how old are you?" 17. "And you've never had formal training?" "No. Just Mrs. Chen showing me things twice a week, and YouTube videos when we have good internet." Dr. Hargrove walked slowly back to her colleagues and bent down to confer with them in hushed tones. Alex sat awkwardly at the piano, not sure if he should leave or stay. After what felt like forever, Dr. Hargrove straightened up and turned to face him again. "Mr. Rivera, do you know what I said before you began playing?" Alex looked down at his hands. "You said you'd kneel if I could play the piano." "Yes," she said quietly. "I did say that." The room fell silent again. The kind-eyed man was watching. Dr. Hargrove with a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth, as if waiting for something he knew was coming. Dr. Hargrove took a deep breath. Then, to Alex's complete astonishment, She slowly lowered herself to one knee beside the judge's table. Alex stared, not quite believing what he was seeing. The formidable Dr. Victoria Hargrove, former New York Philharmonic musician, director of the prestigious Callaway Music Academy, was kneeling on the polished wooden floor of the audition room, looking up at him with something like wonder in her eyes. "In 30 years of teaching," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the room, "I have never heard someone play with such raw emotional truth." The other judges were smiling now. The woman next to Dr. Hargrove's empty chair gave a small nod of approval. But Alex struggled to find words. "I made mistakes. In the Chopin piece, I know I messed up some of the runs, and technical skills can be taught," Dr. Hargrove interrupted, rising to her feet again. "What you have, that connection to the music, that ability to make us feel what you feel, that can't be taught. That's a gift." She walked back to her chair and sat down, pulling a form from the stack of papers in front of her. "We still have much to discuss, of course, but I believe we would be making a grave error if we didn't offer you a place in our program." Alex felt like the room was spinning slightly. "You mean I got in?" "It's not quite that simple," the kind-eyed man said gently. "The scholarship program is very competitive. We need to review all the applicants before making final decisions, but Dr. Hargrove's recommendation carries considerable weight." "More than considerable," Dr. Hargrove corrected, a new warmth in her voice. "Mr. Rivera, you have extraordinary potential, but you also have a great deal to learn. Your technique is undisciplined, your knowledge of theory is clearly limited, and your sight-reading skills are probably non-existent." "Oh," Alex said, his brief moment of hope deflating. "Which is precisely why you need to be here," she continued. "Talent like yours needs proper nurturing. And She paused, looking slightly embarrassed. "I would be honored to work with you personally." The other judges exchanged surprised glances. Apparently, this was not a common offer. "But there's still the matter of the full scholarship," one of them pointed out. "The board has final approval." Dr. Hargrove waved her hand dismissively. "I'll handle the board. They trust my judgment." Alex's mind was racing, trying to catch up with this sudden change in fortune. Just minutes ago, he'd been a joke to these people. Now Dr. Hargrove was offering to teach him herself? "I don't understand," he said honestly. "What changed?" Dr. Hargrove considered him for a moment before answering. "Mr. Rivera, do you know why I left the Philharmonic to run this academy?" Alex shook his head. "Because after 20 years of performing, I realized I had stopped feeling the music the way I did when I was your age. It had become technical, precise but empty." She tapped the form in front of her with her pen. "What you just played reminded me of why I started playing in the first place. That's worth nurturing." The kind-eyed man stood up. "I think we've kept the other applicants waiting long enough. Mr. Rivera, we'll be in touch within the week regarding the scholarship committee's decision." Alex rose from the piano bench, his legs feeling strangely unsteady. "Thank you," he managed to say. "Thank you all." As he gathered his sheet music, Dr. Hargrove approached him one more time. "Where did you say you practice? The Northside Community Center?" "Yes, they close at 8 on weeknights." She nodded thoughtfully. "I might stop by sometime. I'd like to hear more of your compositions." Alex couldn't find the right words to respond. Instead, he simply nodded and made his way toward the door, feeling the eyes of all 5 judges following him. In the waiting area, the girl with the violin looked up expectantly. "How did it go?" she whispered. Alex opened his mouth to answer, but just then the thin man with the clipboard appeared. "Lily Chen?" he called, and the girl stood up, clutching her violin case. "Good luck," Alex told her, echoing her earlier words, to him. As he walked through the academy's grand entrance hall toward the sunlight outside, Alex pulled out his phone to text his mom. But what could he possibly say? That the director had mocked him, then knelt before him, that his life might have just changed completely in the span of 10 minutes? In the end, he simply wrote, "I played like nobody was watching, and somehow, everyone heard." Alex couldn't focus at school the next day. His mind kept replaying the "I guy" moment Dr. Hargrove knelt on the polished floor of the audition room, her face transformed with surprise and something like respect. His friends noticed his distraction during lunch. "Earth to Alex," said Miguel, waving a hand in front of his face. "You haven't heard a word we've said, have you?" "Sorry," Alex mumbled, pushing his cafeteria food around with a plastic fork. "Just thinking about yesterday." "The audition?" asked Tanya, leaning forward. "You never told us how it went." Alex hesitated. How could he explain what had happened? It still felt like a dream. "It was weird. Good weird, I think." "Did you get in?" Miguel asked. "I don't know yet. They said they'd let me know within a week." "But how did you play?" Tanya pressed. "How did it feel?" Alex considered this. Like finally being heard," he said simply. His friends exchanged glances, not quite understanding but hearing the emotion in his voice. The bell rang, saving Alex from having to explain further. As they gathered their things, Miguel clapped him on the shoulder. "Whatever happens, man, you're still the best pianist I know." Alex smiled gratefully. "I'm the only pianist you know." "Exactly. So technically, I'm not lying." The rest of the school day crawled by. When the final bell rang, Alex headed straight for the community center instead of going home. He needed to play, to make sure yesterday hadn't been a fluke, that he could still find that feeling again. Mrs. Chen was in the activity room when he arrived, showing a group of elementary school kids how to play Heart and Soul. "How was the audition?" she asked when the children's lesson ended. Alex set his backpack down. "I think it went okay. Dr. Hargrove said some nice things." Mrs. Chen's eyebrows shot up. "Victoria Hargrove? Said nice things? That doesn't sound like her. You know her?" Mrs. Chen laughed softly. "Everyone in the classical music world knows Victoria Hargrove. She has a reputation for being brilliant but difficult." "What exactly did she say?" Alex felt his cheeks warm. She said she'd like to teach me personally." Mrs. Chen's mouth fell open. "Alex, that's extraordinary. Victoria Hargrove doesn't teach private students anymore. Not since she became director. She also knelt down after I played," Alex added quietly. "She said she'd do it as a joke before I started, but then she actually did it." Mrs. Chen stared at him for a long moment, then suddenly wrapped him in a tight hug. "I always knew you were special," she whispered. "From the first day you walked in here asking if you could use the piano." Alex remembered that day clearly, how terrified he'd been to ask, how sure he was they'd say no to a 13-year-old kid with no money for lessons. Instead, Mrs. Chen had sat beside him on the bench and showed him where to place his fingers for his first chord. "I wouldn't be here without you," he told her honestly. "Nonsense, the music was always inside you. I just helped you find it." She glanced at her watch. "The center is yours until closing. I have some paperwork to finish." For the next 3 hours, Alex lost himself in playing. He worked on the rough spots in his Chopin piece, trying to clean up the technical errors Dr. Hargrove had mentioned. Then he moved on to his own compositions, tweaking and refining them. He was so absorbed that he didn't notice someone had entered the room until he heard a small cough behind him. Alex spun around on the bench, startled. Dr. Victoria Hargrove stood just inside the doorway, wrapped in an elegant wool coat, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Don't stop on my account," she said. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. "Dr. Hargrove, I wasn't expecting. I mentioned I might stop by," she reminded him, walking further into the room. Her eyes scanned the space. The worn carpet, the mismatched chairs, the bulletin board covered with community announcements and children's artwork. Her gaze settled on the upright piano. "This is where you practice?" There was no judgment in her voice, just curiosity. Still, Alex felt defensive of the place that had given him so much. "It's a good piano. Mrs. Chen makes sure it stays in tune." Dr. Hargrove nodded. Mrs. Chen. Yes, I've been speaking with her on the phone. She thinks very highly of you. Alex didn't know what to say to that, so he remained silent, waiting. Doctor. Hargrove approached the piano and ran her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them down. I spoke to the scholarship committee this morning, she said. Alex's breath caught. Already? I can be very persuasive when necessary. A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. They've agreed to offer you a full scholarship to the academy starting next month. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Full scholarship? Alex repeated, not quite believing what he was hearing. Tuition, materials, everything, and Dr. Hargrove hesitated, something she didn't seem to do often. I'd like to start working with you immediately, unofficially until the term begins, if you're willing. Here? Alex looked around the community center room. No. At the academy. There's a practice room I use. No one will disturb us there. She glanced at her watch. I'm thinking Tuesdays and Thursdays after school, and Saturday mornings. That's a lot of time. Excellence requires commitment, Mr. Rivera. Alex, he said automatically. Everyone calls me Alex. She nodded. Alex, then. Do we have an agreement? It was happening so fast. Yesterday he'd been just another kid from the neighborhood with an impossible dream. Now the director of Callaway was standing in the community center offering him everything he'd ever wanted. Why? He asked suddenly. Why me? There must be hundreds of students who are better than I am. Dr. Hargrove considered his question seriously. There are certainly students with more technical skill, students who've been trained since they could walk, who've performed in competitions around the world. She paused. But when you played yesterday, you made me feel something I hadn't felt in a very long time. You reminded me why music matters. She walked over to the bulletin board and studied the children's drawings pinned there. I've spent my career pursuing perfection, she continued, her back to him. Technical perfection. I believed that was what mattered most. And then yesterday, a 17-year-old boy with no formal training showed me what I've been missing. She turned to face him again. So you see, this isn't entirely selfless on my part. I have as much to gain from working with you as you do from working with me. Alex tried to process her words. The idea that he, Alex Rivera, could have anything to teach someone like Victoria Hargrove seemed impossible, and yet the look in her eyes told him she was completely serious. I don't know what to say, he admitted. Say yes, she replied simply. Alex thought about what this would mean. Hours of practice beyond his already busy schedule, the pressure of living up to Dr. Hargrove's expectations, navigating a world so different from the one he knew. But he also thought about the grand piano in the audition room, about the music he could create with proper training, about his mom's face when he told her about the scholarship. Yes, he said. Definitely yes. Dr. Hargrove nodded, as if she'd never doubted his answer. Good, we'll start tomorrow, 4 o'clock. She reached into her purse and handed him a small card with the academy's address and her phone number. I should warn you, she added, her tone becoming more stern. I am not an easy teacher. I will push you harder than you've ever been pushed. There will be days you'll hate me for it. I understand. Do you? She studied his face. This isn't a fairy tale, Alex. The scholarship is just the beginning. The real work starts now. I'm not afraid of hard work, he told her, meeting her. Gaze steadily, something like approval flickered in her eyes. No, I don't believe you are. She glanced around the room one more time. Finish your practice, I'll see you tomorrow. As she turned to leave, Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. The two women looked at each other for a long moment. Victoria, Mrs. Chen said with a slight bow of her head. Lynn, Dr. Hargrove replied with equal formality. Then, more softly, you found a diamond in the rough. Mrs. Chen smiled. I merely provided the space. He did the rest himself. After Dr. Hargrove left, Alex sat in stunned silence, the small business card clutched in his hand. Mrs. Chen sat beside him on the piano bench. Things are going to change for you now, she said gently. Alex nodded, a mixture of excitement and fear swirling in his chest. Is it wrong that I'm scared? It would be strange if you weren't, Mrs. Chen assured him. But remember something. Important, Alex. No matter what happens at that fancy academy, no matter how much your playing changes under Dr. Hargrove's teaching, the music that made her kneel is already inside you. Don't lose that. Alex tucked the card carefully into his wallet. Tomorrow he would step into a new world. But tonight, he would play one more time in the place where it all began. The academy looked different in the late afternoon light. Without the nervous energy of audition day, Alex could appreciate the old brick building with its tall windows and ivy-covered walls. He checked his watch, 3:45 p.m. He was early for his first lesson with Dr. Hargrove, but being late wasn't an option. A security guard at the entrance checked his name against a list, then pointed him toward a narrow staircase. "Third floor, end of the hall," the man said. "Dr. Hargrove's private studio." Each step up the wooden staircase felt like climbing a mountain. Alex's backpack, stuffed with sheet music and textbooks, seemed to grow heavier with every floor. By the time he reached the third-floor hallway, his heart was racing, partly from the climb, mostly from nerves. The hallway was lined with practice rooms, and through the small windows in each door, Alex could see students playing various instruments. A girl about his age was working through a difficult violin piece, her face tight with concentration. 2 rooms down, a boy hunched over a cello, his bow moving so fast it was almost a blur. Everyone looked so serious, so skilled. What am I doing here? Alex wondered, the familiar doubt creeping back. The hallway ended at a heavy wooden door with a small brass plate that read, Dr. Victoria Hargrove, Director. Alex took a deep breath and knocked. "Come in," called a voice from inside. The room beyond was larger than Alex expected, with high ceilings and windows that looked out over the academy's courtyard. One wall was lined with bookshelves packed with scores and music theory texts. Another held framed photographs and concert programs from Dr. Hargrove's performing days. And in the center of the room stood not one but 2 grand pianos, facing each other like mirror images. Dr. Hargrove sat at one of them, making notes on a sheet of music. She looked up when Alex entered, her expression unreadable. "You're early," she said, checking her watch. "Good. Punctuality matters in music. Every note must be played at exactly the right moment, not a second sooner or later." Alex nodded, still standing awkwardly by the door, his backpack clutched in front of him like a shield. "You can put your things over." Alex did as he was told, trying not to stare at the beautiful instruments. The community center's upright suddenly seemed like a toy in comparison. "These are Steinways," Dr. Hargrove said, noticing his expression. This one was a gift from a former student who went on to become rather famous. Her fingers brushed the glossy black surface of the piano she sat at. "The other belonged to my teacher, who left it to me when she died." "They're beautiful," Alex said softly. "They're tools," Dr. Hargrove corrected, though not unkindly. "Magnificent tools, yes, but tools nonetheless. It's what you do with them that matters." She gestured to the second piano. "Sit. Let's begin." For the next 2 hours, Dr. Hargrove worked Alex harder than he'd ever been worked before. She started by assessing his technique, having him play scales and arpeggios, stopping him constantly to correct his finger positioning, his posture, his breathing. "Your wrists are too tense," she said. "You're playing from your fingers when you should be playing from your entire body." She demonstrated, her own hands floating over the keys with effortless grace, drawing out sounds Alex hadn't known were possible. "Again," she said after each attempt. "Again, again." By the time they moved on to actual pieces, Alex's arms ached, and his head was swimming with new information. Dr. Hargrove had him play the Chopin ballade from his audition, stopping him every few measures. "Here, you're rushing. Feel the tension in the phrase before you resolve it." Or, "This passage needs more color. You're playing the notes, but you're not telling the story." It was exhausting and exhilarating all at once. For every 10 corrections, there would be one moment of praise, a brief nod, a yes like that somehow made all the struggle worthwhile. Finally, Dr. Hargrove closed the score. That's enough for today. Alex rolled his shoulders, suddenly aware of how stiff he'd become. The clock on the wall showed 6:30 p.m. Should I do anything specific before our next lesson? He asked. Practice everything we covered today. 3 hours minimum, daily, and read this. She handed him a thick book titled Harmony and Voice Leading, chapters 1 through 3 by Thursday. Alex nodded, trying not to look overwhelmed as he slipped the heavy book into his backpack. Questions? Dr. Hargrove asked, organizing the sheet music on her piano. 1,000 questions swirled in Alex's mind, but one pushed its way to the front. Why did you really decide to teach me? He asked. The truth. Dr. Hargrove looked surprised by his directness. She considered him for a moment, then sighed. Walk with me, she said, standing up. They left the studio and headed down a different corridor than the one Alex had come up. This hallway was darker, lined with portraits of stern-looking men and women, former directors of the academy, Alex guessed. I've been teaching for over 20 years, Dr. Hargrove said as they walked. I've worked with some of the most talented young musicians in the country, students who went on to join major orchestras, to record albums, to perform in the world's great concert halls. She stopped at a large window overlooking the city, lights beginning to twinkle in the early evening. And yet something has been missing. I couldn't put my finger on it until your audition. What was it? Alex asked. Hunger, she said simply. Not ambition. I've seen plenty of that. But real hunger for the music itself. My most successful students wanted to win, to be the best, to impress. You just want to play. She turned to look at him. That's becoming rare in this world. Before Alex could respond, they rounded a corner and came to a set of double doors. Dr. Hargrove pushed them open to reveal the auditorium, where he'd had his audition, now empty and dimly lit. Adhering. Winter showcase is in 8 weeks, she said, her voice echoing slightly in the large space. Every scholarship student performs, it's a tradition. Alex felt a flutter of panic. 8 weeks, but I've barely started learning properly. Which is why we'll be adding Sunday sessions to your schedule, Dr. Hargrove said matter-of-factly. I've already selected your piece. What is it? Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Alex stared at her. He'd heard recordings of that piece. It was famously difficult, even for experienced pianists. That's impossible. I can't learn that in 8 weeks. Not the entire concerto, Dr. Hargrove clarified. Just the first movement. And you won't learn all of it, not to performance level. But you'll learn enough. Why that piece? Why not something simpler? Dr. Hargrove's eyes gleamed in the dim light of the auditorium. Because, Alex, when you play it, even just parts of it, people will understand why I knelt. On the bus ride home, Alex's mind was too full to think clearly. His fingers moved restlessly in his lap, practicing passages from the day's lesson. The weight of the theory book in his backpack reminded him of how much he had to learn, how far behind he was compared to the other students he'd glimpsed in the practice rooms. He almost missed his stop, jumping up at the last second when he recognized the street corner near his apartment building. The evening air was cool as he walked the last few blocks, his body tired but his mind still racing. His mom was in the kitchen when he got home, cooking dinner after her shift at the hospital. The small apartment smelled like onions and peppers. How was it? She asked, looking up from the stove. The pride in her eyes was unmistakable. Since he'd told her about the scholarship, she'd been almost glowing with happiness. Hard, Alex admitted, setting his backpack down. Really hard. Dr. Hargrove doesn't believe in taking it easy. His mom smiled. Good. Nothing worth doing is ever easy. She stirred the pan on the stove. Will you keep going back? Yeah, Alex said, surprising himself with how certain he felt. Yeah, I will. Later that night, after dinner and homework, Alex sat at his keyboard in the corner of the bedroom he shared with his younger brother. He put on headphones so he wouldn't disturb anyone and began working through the exercises Dr. Hargrove had. given him. His fingers stumbled over passages that she had played effortlessly. He adjusted his posture, remembered her instructions about wrist tension, tried again. Better, but still not right. Again. Again. His brother rolled over in the bottom, bunk, half asleep. "You gonna be doing that all night?" he mumbled. "Sorry," Alex whispered. "Just a little longer." She must be pretty amazing, this teacher lady, for you to work so hard. Alex thought about Dr. Hargrove's demanding instructions, her rare moments of approval, the way her own playing had made the studio come alive with sound. "She is," he said. "But I think maybe she sees something amazing in me too." His brother grunted sleepily. "Well, duh, we all do. 'Bout time you noticed." Alex smiled in the darkness, his fingers finding the keys once more. 8 weeks to learn Rachmaninoff. It seemed impossible, but then again so had the idea of Victoria Hargrove kneeling at his audition. Maybe impossible was just another word for not yet. The 8 weeks passed in a blur of lessons, practice, and more practice. Alex's life became a carefully balanced schedule: school during the day, sessions with Dr. Hargrove 4 times a week, and every spare moment spent either at the community center piano or hunched over his keyboard at home. He'd never worked so hard at anything in his life. Dr. Hargrove pushed him relentlessly, often keeping him in the studio until late in the evening, going over the same passages of the Rachmaninoff again and again until his fingers cramped and his back ached. "You're rushing the cadenza," she would say. Or, "More weight in the left hand here. This needs to sound like thunder before the rain." The piece was impossibly difficult. There were days when Alex wondered if Dr. Hargrove had set him up to fail, if this was all some elaborate lesson in humility. But then there would be moments, brief, shining moments, when everything clicked into place, and the music would flow through him like electricity. In those moments he could see Dr. Hargrove's expression soften, a hint of that same wonder he'd seen when she knelt at his audition. "Yes," she would say quietly. "Like that. Remember how that feels." As the showcase approached, Alex began to meet other students at the academy. Most were polite but distant, clearly curious about the new scholarship kid who had somehow become Dr. Hargrove's special project. A few were openly skeptical. "You're playing Rachmaninoff?" asked a tall boy named Richard after overhearing Alex and Dr. Hargrove discussing the piece. "Seriously? I've been working on that for 2 years. "Just the first movement," Alex clarified, trying not to sound defensive. "And not even all of it." Richard raised an eyebrow. "Still, bold choice for someone who's been here, what, a month?" Alex had no good answer for that. It was a bold choice, a crazy one, really. But Dr. Hargrove seemed to believe he could do it, and somehow that made Alex believe it too. The night before the showcase, Alex stayed late at the academy, practicing until the security guard finally told him they were closing the building. He'd reached a point where he knew the piece as well as he was going to. Either it would be enough or it wouldn't. Walking home through the quiet streets, Alex thought about how much had changed in such a short time. 2 months ago, he'd been just another kid playing an old piano in a community center. Now he was about to perform one of the most challenging pieces in the classical repertoire in front of hundreds of people, including potential donors to the academy. His mom was waiting up for him when he "So should you," she countered, setting a plate of food in front of him. "Eat something, you've been forgetting meals again." Alex hadn't realized how hungry he was until he started eating. His mom sat across from him at their small kitchen table, watching him with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" she asked. "I think so," Alex said. "As ready as I can be. Dr. Hargrove wouldn't have chosen this piece if she didn't think you could play it," his mom reminded him. "I know, it's just..." Alex pushed his food around his plate. "Everyone else at the showcase has been training their whole lives. What if I make a fool of myself? What if I make her look bad for believing in me?" His mom reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were rough from years of work, but her touch was gentle. "Listen to me. That woman heard something special in you, something that made her, what did you say, kneel on the floor? Alex nodded. Then trust that. Trust yourself. She squeezed his hand. And know that no matter what happens tomorrow, I couldn't be prouder of you. Later, lying in bed, Alex ran through the piece in his mind one more time. He could see the notes on the page, feel the weight of the keys under his fingers. The Rachmaninoff was a mountain he'd been climbing for weeks, and tomorrow he would find out if he'd made it to the top. The day of the showcase dawned bright and cold. The auditorium was decorated with winter greenery and soft white lights. Programs were stacked neatly on a table in the lobby, listing all the performers and their pieces. Alex's name was near the bottom of the list, with Rachmaninoff, Piano Concerto No. 2 in C minor, Op. 18, First Movement, Excerpt, printed beside it. Backstage was a flurry of activity, students tuning instruments, adjusting concert attire, doing last-minute practice. Alex sat alone in a small practice room, going through the piece one final time on a keyboard. Dr. Hargrove found him there an hour before the showcase was set to begin. "How are you feeling?" she asked, closing the door behind her. "Nervous," Alex admitted. "Really nervous," Dr. Hargrove nodded. "Good. Channel it. Use it." She straightened the collar of his borrowed suit jacket. Someone from the Academy's office had found it for him when they realized he didn't own formal wear. "Remember what we talked about? This isn't about playing every note perfectly. It's about telling the story." "What if I mess up?" Alex asked, voicing his deepest fear. "Then you'll mess up," Dr. Hargrove said simply. "And the world will keep turning." Her expression softened slightly. "But you won't. You're ready." The auditorium was packed by the time the showcase began. Alex peeked through the curtains and immediately wished he hadn't. The first several performers were flawless. A string quartet, a flautist, 2 vocalists. Each one received enthusiastic applause. Alex's hands grew cold with nerves, and then suddenly it was his turn. The stage manager gave him a nod, and Alex walked out onto the stage, the spotlight momentarily blinding him. The grand piano waited. At the center, lid raised, reflecting the lights overhead. Alex took his seat, adjusted the bench, and looked out at the audience. In the front row, he could see Dr. Hargrove sitting straight-backed and attentive. A few seats down was Mrs. Chen, who had closed the community center early to be there. And, between them, wearing the blue dress she saved for special occasions, was his mom. Alex took a deep breath, placed his hands on the keys, and began to play. The opening chords of the Rachmaninoff filled the auditorium, dark, somber, building tension. Alex could feel the weight of the music, the story it told of struggle and determination. As he moved into the main theme, his initial nervousness faded, replaced by total focus on the piece. This was the mountain he'd been climbing. This was what all those hours of practice had been for. His fingers found the keys without hesitation, his body swaying slightly with the emotional peaks and valleys of the music. He could hear Dr. Hargrove's voice in his head. "More weight here. Let it breathe there. Tell the story." And he did. With every note, Alex told his story, of late nights practicing on a keyboard with taped keys, of a community center that became a second home, of a teacher who had knelt before him in recognition of something he hadn't known he possessed. When he reached the cadenza, the solo passage that had given him so much trouble in practice, time seemed to slow down. His hands moved across the keys with a confidence he'd never felt before. The notes flowed from his fingers as naturally as breathing. The final chords of his excerpt rang out, powerful and resolute. For a moment after the last note faded, there was complete silence in the auditorium. Alex sat frozen at the piano, hardly daring to breathe. Then the applause began, scattered at first, then building until it filled the entire space. Alex stood shakily and turned to face the audience, who had risen to their feet. In the front row, Mrs. Chen was wiping tears from her eyes. His mother was clapping so hard it must have hurt her hands, and beside them stood Dr. Hargrove, her usual composure replaced by an expression of unmistakable pride. As Alex bowed, he caught Dr. Hargrove's eye. She nodded once, a gesture that contained everything she couldn't say aloud in that moment. "You did it. I knew you could." Later, after the showcase ended and the audience began to filter out into the lobby for refreshments, Dr. Hargrove found Alex backstage. "Well?" he asked, still riding the adrenaline of the performance. Dr. Hargrove looked at him thoughtfully. "You made some technical errors in the development section. Your tempo was inconsistent in places. The phrasing in the second theme could have been clearer." Alex's heart sank slightly, though he wasn't surprised by the critique. "And yet, Dr. Hargrove continued, her voice softening, "you played with more genuine emotion than anyone else on that stage tonight. You made people feel the music, not just hear it." She held out her hand. "Congratulations, Alex, you've earned your place here." As they shook hands, Alex realized something had shifted between them. He was no longer just a charity case, a raw talent she had taken a chance on. He was her student and she was his teacher, and together they had created something beautiful. In the lobby, Alex found his mom and Mrs. Chen waiting for him. His mom pulled him into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Over her shoulder, Alex could see other students looking at him differently now. Richard, the boy who had questioned his ability to play Rachmaninoff, gave him a respectful nod. Several academy donors were speaking with Dr. Hargrove, glancing in his direction with interest. Mrs. Chen squeezed his arm. "I told you, didn't I? The music was always inside you." Alex smiled, the truth of her words resonating within him.